Hello and welcome to another video. This is part 3 of the series, The Biblical Calendar No One Talks About. I hope that the first two parts have been a blessing to you. And if you kind of just feel like you're hanging on by a little bit of a thread and you're like, I'm trying to follow this guy, I'm not really sure how all these pieces of the puzzle fit together. I hope that this video really starts to form the picture for you. Um, as we're going to now get into our time frame. We're going to take the part of the calendar that says, okay, we're talking about our day and age now, and so I'm gonna set the scene for that. So let's dive right into it and have some fun with this. Okay, so let's talk about our time in history, 1925 to 2075. Okay, so we have this calendar. It claims to show us 7,000 years of history. It claims that the last 7,000 years, these light purple two ages, because remember, each of these sections are called onas of 500-year periods, and then within each ona is 10 jubilees, which are the smaller sections there in the second ring. So the first inner ring and then the second inner ring we've got covered here with the light purple right at the end. So Millennial Kingdom 2075 to 3075. Okay, so we're not going to talk about that right now, but what it claims is that just before that, this red section here, that's our last Ona 500 year period, which would go from 1575 AD to 2075 AD. And then the last three jubilees here, because like I said, each is a 50-year period. So you'd have 1570, first jubilee would be from 1575 to 1625, just to give you an idea. Okay, so now we've gone through these jubilees here. We're in the last three. We're talking about where jubilee number 7 in this section is 1925 to 1975 AD. And then Jubilee number 10 is 2025 next year to 2075 AD. So we're talking about that period on the calendar. So if we were to find, for example, anything in the 12, I believe it's the 12th Ona. So here we have from the beginning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You've got the light blue here that I didn't get rid of. And then you've got, which would be the 11th, and then the 12th, the light red Ona. So if we found prophecies, for example, that said in the 12th Ona, in the 7th Jubilee or the 8th Jubilee or something like that, that would be our time frame. And so then we would pay attention to that type of a prophecy because that would be specifically based on this calendar it would be applying to, and then we'd be able to say, okay, yes, that is happening in our time frame, and we can verify that. So unfortunately, I don't have anything that specific, but we need to identify here on the time frame. So here's what my thing that I'm looking at. So this calendar predicts that there's a millennial kingdom coming from 2075 AD to 3075 AD. So if we can take the Bible and things that it says about just that happens just before the millennial kingdom, before the second return of Jesus, then we can apply it. We can say, okay, this calendar is saying that in these last periods of time here, we should be seeing this stuff before the millennial kingdom on this calendar. And so we'd be able to tie the two together. So I hope we can do that. First thing that we need to understand about eschatology, which is just basically the fancy word for end times, is that we need to realize there are two boxes of puzzle pieces. And this is one of the things that I think I find fascinating about the topic, but I think most people, when you listen to a pastor or teacher talk about the end times or eschatology, is that they don't realize that there are two boxes of puzzle pieces. There's the Jewish box of understanding of this time period, and then there's the Christian box of understanding. And without both boxes, the picture will be very That's supposed to be very will be merry and difficult to see. Murky. That was supposed to be murky. I don't know how that ended up as merry, but I apologize for the typo there. But it'll be merry and difficult. That's all it'll be, right? So anyway, okay. So what do Jewish people believe? The Jewish people believe that there is a Messiah coming. They are looking for his arrival, and so in an article here in Israel 365 News in July 21st of 2020 talks about there wasn't a rabbi interviewed. He reveals the date of the Messiah's arrival, and so here's the article. And basically, so here's what I'm going to do. You can pause the video, read the article. Notice that the dates, we've already passed September 2020 and 2021. So, but I want you to, in the next slide, I'm going to take out the dates, and I want to focus on what he says as far as, because one of the things you'll learn if you watch any even Christian videos is that we truly believe that Jesus is coming back. And so we're going to talk about, and you probably say, you know what, well, Christians have been saying that they believe um, Jesus is coming back for 2,000 years. Well, hopefully in the last video, when I showed those early Christian um, fathers who had written about this 7,000 year concept, or the 6,000 year period of time where until the second coming, that you realized not all Christians believed that Jesus was coming back at any date, that those ones believed that at the end of 6,000 years, which they knew we weren't at yet, that Jesus would return. And so, no, I believe that you might feel that Christians have always been saying that Jesus is coming, but there's a reason why for the last 50 years people have been saying Jesus is coming back, especially like since the 70s, why it's really like been cranked up a notch. And I hope that these videos show you is because we're in the last jubilees. We're in the last period of time. And even though we might like 50 years for us is a long time, right? Like in our life, that's a huge chunk of time. And so we might think every year for those 50 years, oh, Jesus is coming back. Jesus is coming back. But when you think about 6,000 years, that, talking about a 50-year time frame, that's not a long period. Like that's a very narrow window. And so we have to have this perspective that, yes, sure, Christians have been saying since the 70s that Jesus is coming back, but I hope in these videos I'm going to show you why I believe we're getting closer and closer, and that it's not far away. Okay, so you can read this article here, but I'm going to show you on this. So what I've done here is here's the same text, but I've removed the dates because I hate date setting when it's wrong. So let's pay attention to what he believes the text that he's studying says. He says, warning of a one world government ruling the world. The rabbi cautions that in Hebrew calendar year Taf Shin Pei Aleph, from Tevet, January, February until Elul, August, September, there will be 9 months where the new order rules. Okay? In the following year of Taf Shin Pei Bet, a year of Yovel or Jubilee on Yom Kippur, Messiah will reveal himself and then disappear. Okay, so what does this mean? If we go back to our calendar, let me see, can I go forward? Okay, sorry, just give me, should have put an extra, okay. Each of these little, see where these 3 green sections are here, this light green, where it talks about Jubilee? Okay, so each is a 50 year. So when we're talking about 1925, that's a Jubilee year. 1975, that's a Jubilee year. 2025 is a Jubilee year. Based on this calendar, based on how we linked up our calendar with this calendar last video. Okay? So the reason I believe that his original date setting was wrong was because of the understanding of when the Jubilee years. So he says here in the second paragraph, in the following year of Tafshin Pebet, a year of Yovel, Jubilee, on Yom Kippur. Okay, so 2025 is, based on this Zadok calendar, is the year of Jubilee. So in that year, it's going to go from March, the spring equinox, to March 2025 to the spring equinox of 2026. That's the Jubilee year. He is saying that in the year of Jubilee on Yom Kippur, which is later on in the fall of 2025, he believes the Messiah will reveal himself and then disappear. Yom Kippur falls on September 15th or whatever 2025. It'll fall sometime in September, October. There's You can just look it up, Yom Kippur 2025. That's when he believes that their Messiah will reveal himself. Um, and so this is, but he's saying, but before that, before this year of Jubilee, he is warning of a one world government ruling the world, and he cautions that it's going to go from January, February to August to September. Well, when is the year? Well, that's 2024, from January to August. What I find interesting right now that's happening is that in the BRICS nations, Russia is the um, I don't know if it's the host or but the leader of the BRICS nations. And right now, with the alliance with Iran and the Russian soldiers in Syria and Israel, in a war with Syria, that it's just interesting to me that you've got this BRICS conglomeration where you've got some nations that aren't very Israel friendly, and that they're kind of involved in this Middle East kind of conflict. That you've got Americans there, and you've got Russians there, and you've got Iranians, and you've got different countries in this region that are at war via proxy or against each other and all this stuff. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens from January to September of this year, and how does it become more difficult for the Jewish people. Are they attacked more? Is there greater wars? What is going to happen from now until the fall? And so he says that then, um, come next year, come that he believes that next fall in 2025 that this Messiah is going to emerge. He says in the third paragraph here, the rabbi then sources the Talmud, revealing that at the end of the Jubilee year, so that would be March of 2026. Now he believes that the Jubilee year goes from their fall, because Rosh Hashanah, which they often call the head of the year, goes from the fall to the fall. So let's just take the Jubilee year going from the fall to the fall of 2026. He believes that by the fall of 2026, this Messiah will reemerge again on Yom Kippur, and it says that on Yom Kippur Moses brought the Torah down from Sinai, and in the desert they received the Torah, and in the desert they will receive Messiah. No, it's a typo. It says desert, but it's desert. By this time, the desert will not be what you think it is. It'll be something completely different. And he goes on, and he says, and then the last paragraph here, between Yom Kippur 2026, the Messiah will make his second appearance, and we will see the final redemption. And so he believes that, it, based on the information and applying the Jubilee year by this Zadok calendar of 2025, that between 2025 and 2026, the Jewish Messiah is going to make a first appearance, and then will make a second appearance. And at the second appearance, then will usher in the Messianic age. And so it's definitely something to pay attention to. But they believe that it's close. And so both Jews and Christians believe that the Messiah comes in year 6000, which is the Jubilee year. Then we need to know which year is the Jubilee. Now, based on this calendar, that isn't the 2025 isn't the 6000 year, but I think there's something interesting. I'll go over why I think we might be closer, instead of waiting till 2075, why it might happen sooner. But anyway, because the rabbi does say that theoretically, the Messiah could, here in the last paragraph, the rabbi added as a disclaimer that the Messiah can theoretically arrive sooner, but he is basing his analysis on the Kabbalistic teachings, Ramchal, as well as the Talmud. And so the rabbi thought, yes, in 2021 to 2022, that was a Jubilee. And maybe it was, but we didn't see any declaration that their Messiah had come. And so we just need to wait and see. But if Ken Johnson believes that the 2025 is the next Jubilee, then it'll be interesting to see between 2025 and especially in around Yom Kippur 2025 to 2026, whether there is a person who uh, appears and that the Jewish people say, here our Messiah, long-awaited Messiah has come. That would be interesting to pay attention to. So let's assume 2025 is the Jubilee year, that it is year 5950, the last 50 years until the year 6000. And that would go from March 2025 to March 2026. He is talking about one world government ruling. He cautions and so that could be now between September 23 and September 24. That from January and February 2024 into August, September 24, there will be 9 months where this so-called New World Order rules. This New World Order he compares to Hitler. In a recent interview, renowned Israeli Rabbi Daniel Assor warned that the globalist takeover happening as we speak, if Hitler is the Third Reich, then the New World Order is the Fourth Reich. It's Amalek's last meeting with us before the Messiah's arrival. And so, what if this New World Order is not like the WEF or whatever, but what if it's BRICS, led by Russia, having an alliance, like I said, of countries that aren't very Israel friendly and are in a conflict right now? And so, is he talking about that, you know, this new alliance, this New World Order is going to be really if he's talking about Hitler and the Third Reich and this is the Fourth Reich, right? Like could it be really massive? It could be massively brutal for the Jewish people, and we have to pay attention to that. And so he goes on to say, like I said, that the Messiah will reveal himself and then disappear, uh, you know, on Yom Kippur 2025. And pardon me, that should say, oh, um, yeah, or could be 2024, could be 2025 to make the first appearance, and then from 25 to 26 could be the second redemption, and so just to kind of pay attention around the fall over the next couple of years around Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is there a person who declares or is declared the long-awaited Messiah, and I just want to mention here what's interesting when he talks about that Moses brought the Torah down from Sinai in the desert. We received the Torah, and in the desert we receive Messiah. It's just interesting that Jesus in Matthew 24 says, therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, talking about the Messiah. He's like, do not go out. Look, he is in the inner rooms. Do not believe it. Because if Jesus is the Jewish Messiah, then any other messiahs that claim to be the Jewish Messiah are false messiahs. And Jesus talks about that. And again, I'm not here to say anything against the Jewish people or anything like that. I'm just simply saying that if Jesus is the Messiah, then anyone else is not the Messiah, and they would be false messiahs. And so that is what he claims. Jesus claims in the New Testament. And so something to pay attention to. All right, and between Yom Kippur 2025 and 2026, the Messiah will make his second appearance, and we will see the final redemption, and the Messianic age will begin. And that's the end of the interview. The second appearance of this Messiah, I believe, will be after a time of great war, and that's what the Jewish people believe as well. That before the Messianic age, it will be a time of great war and great trial for them, and that The difference between my particular view is that because I believe Jesus is the Messiah, that is the one we're waiting for, that a person who arises and is declared the Messiah is a false Messiah. And Hollywood and modern Christianity has turned this term Antichrist into this boogeyman, and look, he's not a good person. And the further along, like, the saying, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. um that's kind of what the Antichrist becomes, but it's basically the word Antichrist is Messiah, or a Messiah in place of the true Messiah. After this time of war, that this false Messiah at this second appearing will facilitate a 7-year peace agreement between Israel and the remaining nations, after the Lord has given Israel the victory of what's called the Gog Magog War, that's found in Ezekiel 38:39. And I believe, just getting into, as I've gone through before in different videos, I believe that that war is seal 6 in Revelation 6, and that it continues through Revelation 8 through 9 until the peace treaty is signed and the final 7 years occurs, which is in Revelation 10 and 11. So that's just a side note, but that's explained in different videos. But I will get into it in the fourth video to show how I understand from a biblical standpoint things will unfold. But if you don't follow that right now, that's okay. I'll break it down. But what we need to just pay attention to is that in the Bible, it talks about the end of days. It talks about Jesus' second return, and or second coming. And so when you look at the book of Revelation, it's got 21 sets of events. You've got 7 seals, then you've got 7 trumpets, then you've got 7 bowls. So 21 separate events that lead to the second coming. And the first event, the first seal 1 is what it is, the first event that kind of begins the dominoes falling that will eventually lead to the second coming of Jesus, is a false Messiah, somebody who comes in place of the true Messiah, of Jesus, that he is a mimic, he is a counterfeit. And so when we look at this, if 2025 is the Jubilee year, and if this rabbi's understanding of what's going to happen in the Jubilee year, then we remember the biblical calendar doesn't start in fall, but it starts in spring. And so to pay attention that in September 2025, um, could be, the date. September 24 could be where they declare that their Messiah has come, then he disappears, and then in September 25, it would be the second redemption. That the rabbi believes that there's a year space between this first appearing and then the second appearing. And so it's going to be interesting to watch in the fall of this year. Is there a person who is declared the Jewish Messiah, and then does he disappear, go away, go fade into the background, and then reappear in September of 2025? Just some thoughts. And so, but we're watching for signs. The all I wanted to show from this calendar so far is that it does include our history. It includes the date that we're living in right now, that it claims to go further into the future, to the year 7,000. Like I said, 6,000 years of human history, and then 1,000 years of the Messianic age, or Messiah age. And so if we're in those last few Jubilee periods, last few periods of 50, and we're coming up to the last one, then I think that's something to pay attention to so that we can understand the context. I'm not looking to find out the exact date or the exact year. Like I said, I put that out there for what to pay attention for this fall and next fall. But what I think we need to pay attention to the signs is, once we see I believe once a Messiah is declared, that the Jewish Messiah has, long-awaited Messiah has come, and they say this is who he is. I believe that that's seal one. I believe that the first event of Revelation will begin the domino effect that will lead to the second coming of Jesus. And so that's all I want to do. But what I want to show is just what the Jewish people believe. They believe that before the time of Mashiach or Messiah, there shall be war and suffering. And they reference here Ezekiel 38. This is from Judaism 101 about the Mashiach or the Messiah and what they think the Messiah will do, when they think the Messiah will come, all the things that they're looking for. And so, like I said, I believe that before this time of peace that this Messiah figure is going to bring it, and I put peace in quotes, because I don't believe it's going to be a lasting peace. I believe it's going to be a piece of religious authoritarianism that'll be based on very strict laws, religious laws. But again, it's going to be better than the wars that were going on before. So they believe that at this end of the time of war and suffering, the Mashiach will come. He'll bring about political and spiritual redemption of Jewish people by bringing all the Jewish people back to Israel and restoring Jerusalem. He will establish a government in Israel that will be the center of all the world government, both for Jews and Gentiles. He will rebuild the temple and reestablish worship and do all these things, right? And it talks about that it's called Olam Abba, that the world will recognize the Jewish God as the only one true God, and the Jewish religion as the only true religion. And so that's, like I said, that's what they believe, and so I believe that the war will be just before the final 7 years till Jesus returns, and then in the final 7 years, these are some of the things that they will begin at the beginning. And like I said later on, what the Bible talks about is that this dude, this person, false Messiah, is not a good person. Like I said, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that's what we'll see. Here's why I'm figuring out that it's not. We're not here to find out the exact date. What we see is we have a window for what to look for the events. Because Jesus says in Matthew 24, "For there will be greater anguish than any time since the world began, and will never be so great again. In fact, unless the time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive, but it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones." It's nice if 2075 is year 6000. I think, like I said, it's not about specific dates. I think we need to know that we're in the season, we're in the time frame, we're entering the last Jubilee is by this calendar. And so, but Jesus says that if he doesn't shorten the time, not a single person will survive. He comes back, because if he doesn't come back, humanity will cause its own self-extinction. So it says here, in fact, unless the time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive. This means that if Jesus waits to the year 6000, 2075, he'd return and we'd all be extinct. We'd cause our own self-extinction. How would we do that? Via war. Regardless of how you read Revelation, there is a war theme in that book, and that's how we would um, cause our own self-extinction. And so he talks about that he's going to cut the time short, um, because of how rapidly we would be moving towards our own self-extinction. And then that's why he would return. And so I don't think it's an unknown date per se. I don't think I can know exactly the date, but the Bible talks about look for specific things. Here's how you know when you're in the season. Here's what to pay attention to. Matthew 24, Mark 13, Jesus gives us a start date when to watch. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and put forth leaves, know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that he is near at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. going back a few chapters in Mark 11, Matthew 21, Jesus curses the fig tree and it's dead the next day. I recommend this video to understand Mark 11 and the cursing of the fig tree. But basically, it's by Brandon Robbins, and it's called Why You Should Be Concerned Jesus Killed the Tree. When Jesus cursed the fig tree in Mark 11, it was a sign that the Lord would take everything away from Israel for its sins, which is found in Jeremiah 8:13. We see the fulfillment between 70 AD and 135 AD, where the Lord took away the temple, took away Jerusalem, he took away the land, the promised land, and even the name Israel, he took it all away. And in Romans 11, it says that the Lord even blinded the Jewish people for a time to the knowledge and identity of the Messiah. What then? Israel has not obtained what it seeks, but the elect have obtained it, and the rest were blinded, just as it is written, God has given them a spirit of stupor, eyes that should not see and ears that should not hear to this very day. And it's to the knowledge of the Messiah. And so in Mark 11, Jesus curses the fig tree, and the next day it dies, which was in 32 AD. That's when Jesus cursed it, but it wasn't fulfilled until 135 AD, 103 years later. And so what the connection here is, and where I think a lot of Christians have gotten mixed up on this topic, is they saw Israel become a nation. They're like, oh, this is the fig tree. So in Mark 13, in connection with his return, Jesus says the fig tree will bloom again. So this tree I cursed a few days ago, and it's dead, and you all saw it die. Well, now talking about when he's returning, and one of the signs, he says it's going to bloom again. It's going to bring forth leaves. It's going to come alive again. What that the symbolism there is that the Lord will reverse the curse. So on May 14th, 1948, Israel was reborn not in Africa where it had originally been proposed, but in the same land it was in the past. In 1967, the Lord allowed the Jewish people back into Jerusalem, and soon they will rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And this isn't about Zionism. This isn't about being super pro Israel. This is about understanding biblical prophecy, and that these things happening, even if I didn't agree with the politics of Israel, to understand that God owns the land. You see that throughout Scripture in Leviticus 23, in 2 Chronicles 6, in Joel 3. He owns in Isaiah 45. The Lord owns the land. That's his land. And so when he allows the Jewish people back into the land and into his city of Jerusalem, that's something we need to pay attention to. It's not about being pro Israel or whatever. It's about saying, okay, God owns the land. He owns the city. He's declared his ownership, claim of ownership over the land and the city. So now, why, after 1800 years, has he allowed the Jewish people back into the land and into the city? And it's because this was always the plan. He's promised that he would. And so soon their eyes will begin to be opened and will slowly come to see the identity of the true Messiah. But if it took 103 years for the curse to be fulfilled, then why not see it take 103 years for it to be reversed? And so what we would end up with is, if you take 1948 plus 103, it would be 2051. And so in Mark 13 and Matthew 24, it says, now learn the parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and put forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see these things happening, know that he is near at the door. As assuredly I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place. What if a generation is one lifespan where people born in 1948 see the fig tree bloom and they will not all die off or pass away before he returns? So if you say, okay, it took 103 years for the first curse to be fulfilled, why not 103 years to see if it'll be reversed, which fits within one lifespan of those born in 1948. They could live 103 years. which would bring us to 2051 instead of 2075. So is Jesus here saying, okay, look, you see that the calendar says 2075, that's the 6,000th year. But if I waited till the 6,000 years, nobody would exist on earth. You'd all, cause your own self-extinction, so that I'm going to cut the day short. And so what if he gives this 103-year period, this one lifespan, to say, okay, I'm going to tell you how short I'm going to cut it. I'm going to show you what signs to pay attention to, but to narrow it down even further, I'm going to say that nobody that was born in 1948, they're not all going to pass away before I return. And so now we've narrowed it down a little bit further. And so here we have, like I said, just a simple timeline. Fig tree blooms in 1948. We're here in 2024, the 75th year of Israel's existence. Before we're at the year 6000 will be the second coming, and the max will be one lifespan of 103 years at maximum or thereabouts, right? Time will tell. So zoom into a timeline here. We are here, 2024, year 75. What we are looking for is the first event, which is the false Messiah, and that's expected to be between September 2024 and September 25. Then we have second event, wars and rumors of wars. Again, before or at the year 6000, second coming, 28 years max from now. Like I said, give or take, because we're talking about one lifespan. And so I hope now that we're talking about our time frame, and we're talking about, okay, here talks about false messiahs, that's the first sign. And we see that the Jewish people are waiting for a Messiah. And if Jesus is the Messiah, then whoever they're waiting for isn't the Messiah. And so then we're talking about wars and rumors of wars, and I'll get into that and some of the other prophecies, because now we have a time frame. We have a time frame to say, okay, between 2025 and 2051, we have a window of what should happen in that period of time. Is it going to be 25 years? Is it going to be 7 years? Is it going to be 15 years? But we have a period of time in all of the 6,000 year history where certain things are going to happen and we pay attention. So it's not about figuring out the date at this point. We know that after next year, we're going to be in the last Jubilee period, last 50-year period of this calendar. And so let's look at all the things that could happen or that we see happening that the Bible talks about. And we can talk about things in Matthew 24, talk about things in Revelation, and understand those parts of Scripture to say, okay, man, like here's things in an order, here's things to pay attention to. And I think it really helps now that we have the time frame and the window to look. If I said to you, okay, I've got a 7,000 year calendar. So if I say within a 25-year period from 2025 to 2050 or 2055, say 25, 30-year period, I'm going to give you a list of a bunch of things globally that is going to happen. How many of those things would you have to say, okay, how did we have this calendar that predates Jesus, that from the Dead Sea Scroll caves, and that are dated 300 to 100 BC? How do we have that calendar now? And we have all these claims talking about the end, at the latter days, in the end times, these things are going to happen. Well, now we can actually look on this biblical calendar and say, okay, here's the section that these events, this 50-year period, these events, or now even 25-year period, 30-year period, let's say at max, that these events should fit in out of 6,000 years. Like that to me is such a small window. But again, I'm just putting this information out there for people who are skeptical to say, okay, so not only do we have these 2,000-year-old writings to say in the last days or these things, where Jesus goes in Matthew 24, a list of things, one right after the other, of things that are going to happen, but now we have a calendar and we can look on the calendar and say, okay, these things have to fit with this within this period of time. Is that something that we're seeing? Is that something that makes sense? Does the Bible paint a picture for our day and age right now that we're looking at? We're like, okay, as much as scary as it is, or we worried as we might be, if the picture fits, then I think that's something to pay attention to. And then the hope is not what's going on in our world today, but our hope lies in something beyond this world, beyond our life, to say, okay, Jesus claimed to be God, he claimed to know the future. We see that future unfolding in front of us before us. It freaks us out, or we're worried about wars, and we're worried about climate stuff, and and there's a lot of concern, you know. But if we could say, okay, but he predicted all of these things. He said this is what the world was going to be like. How could he do that? And maybe at some point that'll lead, some of the people here listening to this to say maybe he is God. Maybe I should be putting my trust in him instead of myself, or instead of politicians or the government or my bank account, to say, I trust in him because, and as much as he says, here's what's happening in the world, and it might feel scary, it might be scary, that our hope is in something bigger, and something that he said, look, these things are going to happen. Don't you let your heart be troubled. Don't panic, right? Be aware this is what's been foretold, and that we should look for his return, that we should put our trust in him. And if you haven't put your faith in Jesus yet, I pray that you will do that. And I hope that this series um, helps you to think about some of these things, and that you would make a decision to put your trust in Jesus instead of yourself, because the world is going to get darker. It's going to get a lot harder. We're going to start seeing the really worst um, of people, because they're going to become desperate. Food and money and jobs and all these things are going to become in short supply in the next little bit. And I think, people, we don't see the best side of people when we're desperate, when we're fearful, and it feels like the world is coming to an end, and we don't know what to do with it. And so, I it is going to get darker, and I pray that for those of you listening, who, like I said, who might be skeptical, that you would look at the stuff I'm laying out here, and that you would make that decision to say, you know what, I don't have any hope in people or elections or whatever, or even myself, that we've all made mistakes, we've all messed up our lives, but we can put our faith and trust in Jesus, who predicted the future, and it's unfolding before us, and that he claimed to be God, that the God that we pray to, the God that we wonder, does he really exist? Is he really out there? If he is, what is he like? That it's Jesus, and that we put our trust and faith in him instead of ourselves, so that he can save us, and free us from the imprisonment of our iniquities and our sin. And so, yeah, I just pray for those who are listening, that if you haven't made a decision for Jesus, that you put your faith and trust in him tonight, and get that right, to get that set away, and taken care of. And if you're still a little bit skeptical, I hope that the next part or parts of this series helps you in your search for truth. And so take care. Lord bless you, and I'll talk to you next time.